That thing belongs in a museum, old man, not on my firing line. The voice cut through the morning air like a blade, sharp and edged with the unearned confidence of youth. Second Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood at the entrance to the Fort Benning rifle range, his tactical gear pristine, his boots polished to a mirror shine, his posture radiating the kind of authority that comes from 3 years of officer training and exactly 0 seconds of combat. Behind him stood a squad of young recruits, fresh from basic, their uniforms still holding the creases from the quartermaster, their eyes bright with the hunger to prove something. They laughed when the lieutenant spoke. They always did. The old man did not look up. His name was Robert James Walsh, and he was 84 years old. He wore a canvas work jacket that smelled of rain and wood smoke, worn jeans faded nearly white at the thighs, and a blue checkered shirt with the sleeves rolled up despite the February cold. His hands were liver-spotted but perfectly steady as he held the rifle in a soft cloth bag, cradling it like a man carries something precious without needing to announce that it is precious. When he finally raised his pale blue eyes, the color of a winter sky, with a depth that seemed to absorb aggression without reflecting it back, the young officer's smile didn't waver. But something in the squad shifted. They felt it, the way a room feels when something unseen has entered. "I said that thing doesn't belong here," Webb repeated, his voice louder now, because his audience had given him permission to escalate. He stepped closer, his jaw tight, playing to the recruits behind him. "We don't run museum tours on this range, old man. We run shooting competitions for soldiers. Active duty soldiers. Not whatever you are." The facility director had called the main office in a panic that morning. "There's a civilian here," he'd said. "He has a firing range reservation from 1975. The young lieutenant's eyes had widened with disbelief. A reservation from 1975. That was impossible. The records didn't go back that far. But the digital system showed it clear as day. An automatic annual renewal. Never once canceled, never once billed. Robert James Walsh. Reserved time on range 7 every second Tuesday of the month. For 49 years. The morning sun beat down on the range in that harsh February way that makes everything look harder and older than it is. The desert scrub around them was colorless. The targets downrange were simple white paper, marked with concentric rings that had been there so long they looked almost faded. The smell of cordite hung in the air from earlier shooters, mixed with the metallic tang of gun oil and heated metal. In the distance, the flagpoles snapped their colors in a wind that came off the mountains with an edge. Webb moved closer, and his squad moved with him. A formation of youth and certainty. He reached down toward the cloth bag. "Let's take a look at this antique. See what we're working with." His fingers moved toward the fabric. "The wind is tricky today," Robert said quietly. His voice was thin but precise, each word placed deliberately like a man used to being heard in important silence. "It's not just one wind, it's 3. You'll want to account for that when you read the condition." Webb's hand froze. Behind him, one of the recruits stopped laughing. The lieutenant's jaw tightened. No one had ever spoken to him like that on a range. No one had ever suggested he didn't understand the conditions. He pulled the cloth back slowly, deliberately. And there it was, an M40A1 sniper rifle, its wood furniture darkened with age and use, its scope a loopholed Mark IV that looked like it had been carried through 100 miles of bad weather. The rifle was not pristine. It was not showroom perfect. It was worn in a way that spoke of serious use, careful maintenance, and a respect for function over appearance. "A bolt action," one of the young soldiers whispered. "Like from the Vietnam War." "Like from Vietnam," Webb said, sneering. "Like from before most of us were born. Grandpa." You think you're going to outshoot modern soldiers with a relic? He picked up the rifle, hefting it carelessly, letting it dangle from his hand the way a man handles something he believes is worthless. You think you're going to teach us something? Robert did not argue. Robert did not plead. Robert did not threaten. He simply said, "You should be careful with how you hold that. It's holding a story that's longer than your life." The words meant nothing to Webb. He set the rifle back in its cloth, laughing louder. But the laughter had an edge now. The recruits could feel it. The old man's words were a rock thrown into still water, and something in the ripples made their certainty flutter. Webb needed to push harder. He needed to prove something. His hand moved to the old man's shoulder, pressing down with the weight of his rank, his youth, his institutional power. And then, the world shifted. The smell changed first, not cordite, but rain and rot and blood. The light changed. The sun beating down on the range was replaced by the half-light of a jungle canopy, so dense that noon looked like dusk. The sound changed. Instead of boots on gravel and the wind snapping flags, there was the trembling hiss of rain and the distant percussion of artillery so far away it was less a sound than a vibration in the earth itself. Young Bobby Walsh, 19 years old, a spotter for the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Platoon, lying in the mud beside his team leader, a man whose name was Marcus Chen, a man whose call sign was Prophet because he always knew what was coming. They were in a ravine 2 miles from Hue, and they had been there for 6 hours. The target was a North Vietnamese officer who moved between compounds once a day at 0800. Once a day. That was the window. That was the only moment the math worked. One shot, 630 meters, through rain that was falling in sheets thick enough to blur the scope. One shot to disrupt the entire order of battle for a sector of operations that mattered more than the men lying in the mud understood. The spotter's job was to read the conditions the rifle could not see. The scope would show magnification and crosshairs, but it would not tell him what the wind was doing at 200 meters versus 400 meters versus 600. The wind was never one wind. The wind was a conversation between the earth and the sky, and it changed altitude and intention and angle every 100 meters. Bobby read it with a single trembling leaf, watching how it fell, timing its descent, feeling it in the way the rain wasn't falling straight but sideways and then sideways the other direction. He whispered it to Prophet. 6.3 miles per hour, gusting to 7.2, coming from the northeast at 005 degrees. Prophet was silent for a full minute. 6.3, he finally whispered back. "That's beautiful, spotter. That's perfect. You're making me look smart." The target appeared at 7:59. An officer, pristine even in the rain, moving between buildings with the arrogance of a man who had never been hunted. Bobby whispered it. Prophet adjusted. The rifle spoke once. The officer fell. And for one heartbeat, nothing else happened. The rain continued. The artillery continued in the distance. And then the screaming started. And it didn't stop, and they had to move, and Prophet covered their retreat. And that's when the sniper fire found him. 3 rounds hitting him in the side and the back and once in the neck, and Bobby was holding him, and Prophet was saying, "Run, spotter, get out, tell them we got him, tell them we got him." And Bobby was running, the blood from Prophet's wound soaking into his fatigues, his own leg leaving a trail behind him. And he made it to the extraction point, but Prophet didn't, and that's why Bobby carried the rifle. Because Prophet had died with it in his hands. Because everything Prophet knew about reading the wind and the rain and the killing arithmetic of distance and trajectory and time, all of it was now Bobby's job to remember. All of it. The memory vanished. The sun beat down on the range. He blinked, and the gravel solidified under his feet. Webb's hand was still on his shoulder. But the second lieutenant was looking at him differently now. There was something in the old man's face that had changed, and it made Webb's certainty waver. Before he could recover, before he could say something to reestablish dominance, a young man, Specialist Daniel Cross, a lance corporal attached to range safety, excused himself from the squad. "I need to make a call," he said quietly. "Weather check for the afternoon operations. Be right back." He walked to the edge of the facility, out of earshot, and dialed the number from the duty board. When the voice answered, crisp, professional, waiting, Specialist Cross said, "Sir, we have a civilian on the range. Robert James Walsh. He's being confronted by Second Lieutenant Webb. I think you should know who this man is." The silence that followed stretched for 3 full seconds. The kind of silence that occurs when a name hits someone like a physical blow. When the voice came back, it was completely different. Tight, urgent, stripped of all gruffness. "Did you say Robert James Walsh?" "Yes, sir." "He's confirmed location. Now, range 7, sir, Fort Benning. Keep him safe. Keep everyone away from him. Understand me? Don't let anyone touch him. Sending support now. Immediate dispatch." The call ended. But Specialist Cross knew it had already escalated. A call like that didn't just go up one channel. A call like that went everywhere. At battalion headquarters, Colonel James Bridger was standing in the middle of a budget meeting, watching officers argue about ammunition allocations, when his adjutant handed him a note. His face changed. He stood so fast his chair scraped backward and fell. "I'm done," he said. "You have command." He was already walking. At the naval contingent 3 blocks away, the Master Chief was reviewing quarterly training schedules when his phone buzzed. The message was 3 words: "Walsh is on base." He dropped his coffee. The cup shattered. He didn't notice. He was already calling for his Humvee. At the command building, a brigadier general was signing a requisition form when his aide's eyes went wide. The aide whispered something. The general read the message on the desk phone screen, and he was out of his chair before the final syllable was spoken, moving with a speed that belied his 63 years, his driver scrambling to catch up. Back on range 7, Webb was still talking, saying something about respect and proper channels and civilian range regulations, when the sound arrived first. A siren in the distance, then growing closer. Engines building. Multiple engines. The recruits turned to look. Webb didn't. He was still staring at the old man, still trying to assert something, still not understanding that the world had shifted beneath him like continental plates. The convoy arrived with the kind of presence that stops everything. 3 vehicles, moving with purpose, pulling up to the range entrance with the precision of men who had done this 1,000 times. The colonel was first out of the vehicle, followed by the Master Chief and 2 other officers. The general arrived 30 seconds later in his own car. They moved across the range with the singular focus of men who had forgotten every other priority. Webb's mouth opened, then closed. He removed his hand from Robert Walsh's shoulder as if it had burned him. The colonel reached Robert and stopped. His eyes found the lieutenant. His eyes narrowed. And then, in a movement that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the military soul of the service itself, the colonel raised his hand and delivered the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise salute that anyone on that range had ever seen. It was directed at a man in a canvas work jacket and faded jeans. At an 84-year-old janitor, at someone the young officer had just called a museum piece. The gasp moved through the recruits like a wave. Webb's face went ashen. The color drained from his features like water through a broken cup. The colonel held the salute for 3 full seconds, and when he lowered his hand, his voice was clear and formal and carried the weight of everyone who had ever understood what this man was. Second Lieutenant Webb and soldiers under his command, I am Colonel James Bridger, 2nd Marine Division Commander. You are in the presence of Robert James Walsh, call sign Prophet's Echo. Scout Sniper. 1st Marine Division. 47 confirmed engagements. 83 confirmed assists. Awarded the Navy Cross twice, the Silver Star 3 times, the Bronze Star with Valor 5 times. Participated in combat operations in Vietnam across 3 separate tours. Conducted 17 prisoner rescues. Trained the sniper schools at Quantico and Camp Lejeune for a decade following his discharge. Holds the standing record for longest confirmed kill in direct support of human rescue operations. The officers of the United States Marine Corps owe their lives to the skills this man perfected. The colonel paused. Behind him, the Master Chief stood motionless, his jaw tight, his eyes wet. Behind them, soldiers began to understand that they were witnessing something beyond their comprehension. That rifle your sergeant just called a museum piece? Recon grade M40A1, carried through 3 tours of Vietnam. Every notch in that stock represents a moment this man saw what others could not. The moment he saw the kill that mattered. The moment he made the decision that saved lives. The colonel's eyes moved back to Webb, and they were not angry. That would have been too small. They were something much larger. Disappointment. The particular disappointment of a man watching someone dishonor something they didn't understand. You have been dismissed from this facility pending formal review. That will be determined by my office and the base commander. You are restricted from range access pending investigation into your conduct toward a person of distinguished service. 2 military police officers had appeared without anyone noticing them arrive. They waited. Webb moved toward them like a man in a dream. The recruits stood motionless, understanding that they had just witnessed the destruction of a certainty, the collapse of a hierarchy that had seemed as solid as earth. But Robert Walsh was not looking at the colonel. He was watching the lieutenant. And after the MPs had moved Webb toward the waiting vehicle, after the colonel had turned back and was asking if he needed anything, if there was anything the service could provide, after the Master Chief was shaking his hand and trying not to cry, after all of that, Robert walked to where the lieutenant had been standing. The young officer was already in the vehicle, watching through the window. Robert approached and placed his hand gently on the same shoulder where his had rested minutes before. The inversion was noticed by everyone who was watching. The touch was light, careful, gentle. You were right about one thing, Robert said quietly, his voice carrying no triumph, no anger, no satisfaction. Respect matters. It matters more than anything else. The problem is, you were respecting the wrong things. The polish on your boots, the rank on your collar, the confidence in your voice. Those are the things that get easy to love about yourself. But respect the wrong things long enough, and you lose the ability to see what's actually standing in front of you, what actually matters. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, you get a second chance to learn to see. He stepped back. The vehicle pulled away. The range fell quiet again. It was 6 weeks later when Webb walked into the small hardware store on the edge of town. He had been transferred, suspended, sent to mandatory remedial training on military heritage and the history of special operations. He was thinner now, the swagger replaced by something else. A humility that looked unfamiliar on him, like clothes that didn't quite fit yet. Robert was standing in the aisle with a paint can, looking for a specific shade of blue. "Mr. Walsh," Webb said. His voice had changed too. It was quieter, more considered. Robert turned. He recognized the young officer, and there was no surprise in his expression. There was only a kind of patience, as though he had been expecting this moment. "I'm sorry," Webb said. I was arrogant and disrespectful, and I dishonored something that deserved honor. I'm sorry, and I want you to know that I understand why now. I've been reading the history. I've been reading about your service, and I understand what I was mocking. Robert set down the paint can. The apology is received, he said quietly. And it's enough. They stood for a moment in the small hardware store, surrounded by the ordinary tools of small repairs and maintenance work. The light from the storefront windows fell across them in even bars. The young officer watched the old man, waiting for more. But there was nothing more. Only acceptance. Only a small gesture. Robert reached out and placed his hand briefly on the younger man's arm. Then he picked up the paint can and moved toward the checkout, his walk steady, his purpose unchanged. Webb watched him go. In that moment, standing in the fluorescent brightness of the hardware store, surrounded by cans of paint and rolls of tape and all the simple instruments of keeping a home together, he began to understand something larger than his own shame. He understood that there are men walking among us every day, in hardware stores and libraries and diner booths, carrying histories we cannot see, carrying losses we cannot imagine, carrying the grace to forgive someone who never earned the right to ask for forgiveness. These men do not announce themselves. They do not seek honor. They work in silence. And the only respect that matters is the respect that costs something, that comes from understanding, that lives in the moment when we finally see what has been standing in front of us all along. If you were moved by Robert James Walsh's story of quiet courage and timeless wisdom, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes.